Voxday.blogspot.com, and Infogalactic. Thanks for tuning in. I was reading an article that a member of the intellectual dark web, anointed by the New York Times as the approved opposition. I prefer to call them the fake opposition, because that's exactly what they are. And I was reading an article by Ben Shapiro, and it was talking about how conservatives should chase the youth. Now, this is an absolutely ridiculous thing to do, because the core object of conservatism is supposedly the idea of conserving something. And that's exactly what conservatism has failed to do. It's what the conservative movement failed to do. It's what the neoconservative movement failed to do. And it's what this new fake opposition group is not even going to try to do. I was listening to an audiobook in the car the other day. It was called The Last Chance to See, and it was written by Douglas Adams. And it's a really interesting book. It's basically Douglas Adams running around the world, visiting different places and seeing different animals that are on the verge of extinction. In fact, some of the animals that he went to see, like the northern black rhino, actually went extinct very recently. He visited the Yangtze River dolphin, and some other, a lemur in Madagascar, a fruit bat in Mauritius. And it was interesting to me that the thing that really struck him most, I misspoke, not the black rhino, it was the northern white rhino. The southern white rhino is still around, the northern white rhino is now gone. But there is some possibility of bringing it back, because at least they have some DNA. But what I thought was interesting was that when he was visiting China, and it was the first of his 7 trips to China to attempt to see a baiji in the wild. A baiji is what the Yangtze River dolphins are called. And he was meeting with the commission of people who were running the efforts to save the dolphin. And it was really actually quite impressive how they managed to put together a pretty serious rescue attempt, and to build a reserve as part of the river in a very short period of time. And it wasn't just the central organization made possible by the rule of the Communist Party. They did get some money from the central government, they got some money from the state government, but they also did this amazing job of going out and getting sponsorship of everything from like the local brewery, which came out with a baiji beer, to branding some of the minerals that the mining companies were selling. And it was quite clear that Douglas Adams and his friend were just astonished by how these communists, because this was some time ago, 25 years ago or so, but they were clearly astonished how these communists had totally embraced the concept of brand identification and were using the branding in order to help fund these expensive rescue efforts. But the significant thing, and believe it or not, this does actually connect to what I was saying about the fake opposition, is that the main reason that the Chinese commissioners gave for these huge efforts that they were putting forth to try to save this animal was because they felt that a failure to do so, a failure to preserve the animal, was going to shame them in both the eyes of their ancestors and their descendants. They viewed themselves as being part of this great chain of family, this chain of tribe and nation that had a responsibility for the land and the animals in their area. And it really struck me because this is exactly what the fake opposition, like Ben Shapiro, like Jordan Peterson, stand against. When Jordan Peterson is telling you that you have no right to take pride in the accomplishments of your ancestors, what he's also telling you is that you have no responsibility whatsoever to your children and your descendants. I've said repeatedly that the philosophy that Jordan Peterson is pushing is an evil one, and it is. And one aspect of that evil, one way that we know that it is wrong, is that he and Shapiro and all these other fake opposition members are saying, oh, all that matters is the individual. All that matters is you. You should only pay attention to your own needs, your own standards. There's no need to, you have no right to take pride in your legacy. You have no responsibility to instill those traditions and values into your children. After all, if you have no responsibility to carry on the work of your parents, if you have no right to take pride in the legacy and the achievement of your parents, then neither do your children have any right or responsibility to do so with regards to you. I mean, this is a very obvious transitive logic at work, transitive principle of logic at work. And so, I think that it's so important to understand that when conservatives are coming out against identity politics, you need to understand that they are simultaneously coming out against family values, tribal values, and national values. They don't want to admit that they're doing that, but that's exactly what they're doing. And it's also connected to the advice of people like Ben Shapiro to go and chase the young. He's saying, well, Republicans need to change their policies. They need to embrace things like gay marriage, and they need to embrace things like abortion and whatever else it is that the young are okay with. But that's profoundly stupid because the young have no experience. The young don't understand why the traditions existed in the first place, and they don't understand why the traditions are necessary to provide the very society and culture that they enjoy today. And of course, because these people do not want to preserve the West, people who think that Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson and the Weinsteins and all these other fake opposition folks, the Sam Harrises, whatever, they don't want to preserve the West. They do not want to preserve Western civilization. They're not Christian. They're either neutral on Christianity or they're anti-Christian. They don't want to preserve the European nations. To the contrast, they want to replace the European nations. And so the more that you understand this, the more you realize how evil these people are, how evil their objectives are. You know, and you will never, ever see them debating people. Now, I'm not just talking about people like me. You know, Ben Shapiro doesn't debate me because we were both at WorldNet Daily at the same time. He knows I'm smarter than he is. You know, that he's run away from me twice already when people wanted to suggest a debate and that sort of thing. I mean, heck, he even ran away from Milo Yiannopoulos. You know, Jordan Peterson, you know, he's not going to talk to people who are on the genuine right because they'll expose him for the, you know, ideological leftist and rootless anti-traditionalist that he is. You know, these guys talk what appears to be a good game to the unsophisticated. You know, if you aren't familiar with how William F. Buckley did it, how he eliminated the John Birch Society, Samuel Huntington, Samuel Francis, Joe Sobran, if you're not familiar with how Rich Lowry did the same thing and pushed out people like John Derbyshire and Ann Coulter, you know, they are the gatekeepers of the center. You know, what they're trying to do is they're trying to establish a line beyond which you're not allowed to go. And it's kind of funny because they totally project. They talk about this, but they talk about this as if they're being subjected to it, which is not true. You know, some of them are being lightly subjected to a little bit of that, but they're acting like it's a big deal. Meanwhile, they are actively engaging in the very activities and policies that they claim to oppose. You know, Ben Shapiro is running around telling people not to appear on Alex Jones's show. Ben Shapiro has run around and said that we need to hunt down racists and chase them out of their jobs. This is a defender of free speech? You know, Jordan Peterson claimed that it was correct to deplatform Faith Goldy because she did not ask hard questions of someone who was interviewing her. That's absolutely ridiculous. You know, there's absolutely no way you can make a claim like that and be considered a serious intellectual, an honest individual. It's not possible. And so, you know, the more that you understand the way that the fake opposition operates, the more that you see through them. Now, somebody said, how do we deal with this? Let people know about them. You know, when their acolytes go running around praising them, call them on their BS. You know, if you're supporting them, stop supporting them. You know, it's not difficult. They, you know, to a certain extent, you know, they have institutional support, so they're going to be around. But when the more that they get called out on it, it's happening more and more. You know, it's kind of astonishing when you think about how, despite the huge popularity of something like Jordan Peterson, the votes, there were like, you know, 30-something thousand views of the Alex Jones YouTube stuff. And the majority of the thumbs up, thumbs down were actually in support of what Alex and I were saying about these fake opposition folks. And that was before the New York Times came out the next day and underlined the very points that I was making. And so, I have confidence that the truth will eventually come out. The truth has already come out about William F. Buckley. The truth is more or less out about Rich Lowry. Nobody takes these people seriously anymore as, the conservative stalwarts that they were supposed to be, that they were supposed to represent. We have the benefit of time. We have seen what the conservative posture has managed to achieve and to conserve, and that is virtually nothing. And so, I would encourage you to simply keep your eyes open. And when you get that feeling that something's wrong, that's your signal to look deeper. Stop offering excuses for things that you know are wrong. There are so many people that were Jordan Peterson fans, and they excused the stuff that he said that they knew wasn't right. They said, well, he doesn't say that he's a Christian. When somebody comes out and asks him if he's a Christian, he goes off onto this big, pose about how, it just occurred to him that, maybe this is a metaphor, and it's so funny because he goes through, he goes and does the same routine every time, which means that the routine is an act. It cracked me up when at one point he says, strangely, you just, it just occurred to me, the answer just occurred to me. And then he goes and gives an answer that he's given before. Soft interviews that are another indicator. That's right. Anytime you see somebody who only debates to the left, you know that he's probably an imposter because he's afraid to get exposed. I mean, if you look at someone like me, if you look at someone like Milo, Milo's well to my left culturally. But the point is that, we talk to people on either side. I was talking to Martin Van Creveld just the other day. He's a left of center Israeli military historian. I get in, have discussions with a lot of my different authors who range from, agnostics to Catholics to Orthodox, etc. I debated Greg Johnson of Countercurrents. I had Richard Spencer on a brainstorm. I did a debate with Andrew Anglin after his followers complained that I should have been debating him instead of Greg Johnson. I will happily debate Shapiro or Peterson or William Lane Craig or some totally unknown philosophy PhD. There's a debate. You can look on my blog. There's a long and pretty esoteric debate about the empiricism of Sextus Empiricus with some guy who is basically a reader of another author's blog that I happen to disagree with. Okay, that's what you do if you are a honest intellectual. Socrates did not announce that he would only dispute with people who were of a certain stature and to his political left. He didn't play it safe. He didn't play it entirely honest either. I have some complaints about one or two of his debate tactics. But the point is that if you're an honest individual, if you're not a charlatan, then you need to be willing to talk to anyone. You need to be willing to have discussions with people. Of course I would interview Faith Goldy. Why wouldn't I? And so, I don't believe in guilt by association. Now, I do believe that your associations can be informative. I mean, let's face it, if Faith Goldy is persona non grata because she talks to Red Ice or whoever, then how can Jordan Peterson not be persona non grata, considering that he's buddy-buddy with Ben Shapiro? Ben Shapiro is appallingly bad. I've been on Red Ice. I was on Red Ice, I don't know, a year and a half ago. And so, I did a debate with, I've done debates with James Miller, who is a free trader economist. I've talked to Thomas Wood. I've talked to his pal, the economist Bob, spacing on his last name, but he's the one who wrote the textbook. That's what you should do if you're responsible. That's what you should do if you're serious and if you have the ability to stand up and articulate and defend your own beliefs while at the same time asking reasonable and intelligent questions about the beliefs of others. And so, but the thing you have to keep in mind when you're talking about, Brett and Eric Weinstein on Rubin was a nice talk. Okay, so what does the babbling of two left-of-center Jews with a centrist Jew have to do with pretty much anybody else's concerns? Now, some of the stuff that they're going to talk about is going to be reasonable. Why shouldn't it be? There's plenty of stuff that that everybody is interested in. But it's never going to address any of the significant issues of the day. What are the significant issues of the day? They relate to North Korea. They relate to Israel and Iran. These are the significant issues. And yet, you never see people like that addressing anything serious. And so, the idea that there are subjects that cannot be discussed is fundamentally wrong, because the subjects are being discussed. They're just being discussed off camera. They're just being discussed around the dinner table. They're just being discussed in private conversations, and the fact that everybody is afraid to have them out loud is in itself informative. All right? Now, I understand that there are a lot of problems in the world today, and different people have different perspectives on those problems, and different people have different solutions to those problems that they want to offer. But not talking about these things and trying to sweep everything under the carpet is a absolute certain way to ensure that the eventual outcome is going to be negative for pretty much everyone. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter how famous you are. None of that is going to matter if things go, in an excessively destructive way. And, people have to stop living in fear. The Bible says we're not given a spirit of fear. Yes, if you say the wrong thing, if you upset the wrong people, then bad things can happen to you. That's true. On the other hand, bad things happen to people every single day for no reason at all. So, and those other bad things are vastly more likely to happen. I mean, the historical trends are going to play out no matter what those who think they are in control of events believe. I've never seen statements more arrogant than some of the things that the Bush-era neocons used to say. They were saying things like a permanent Republican majority, and we act and we create reality, and by the time you react to our reality, we're changing it again. Well, that's bullshit. There is nothing that those guys are able to do about the growing power of China. I'm sure they're going to, play their various games and that sort of thing, but you know what? It's not going to work. The whole end of history thing was total nonsense to such an extent that Francis Fukuyama is desperately trying to claim that he didn't mean what he clearly meant, and that what he wrote means something else. Because it was a fundamentally flawed perspective. The universe is beyond the control of man. And, yes, we have the ability to break things. We have the ability to ruin things. But you know what? Even if man wipes himself out completely tomorrow, the planet will survive. The universe will go on. And I'm not saying that in a dark or depressive sense. I'm saying that in understanding the fundamental limitations of man as a species. And so there's absolutely no point in living in constant terror of the idea that something bad might happen. Maybe it will. Maybe it won't. This is why it's helpful to be a Christian, because it helps you be optimistic. It helps you live in hope and faith, even when you look around and you see war and rumors of war, etc., etc. Even when the world hates you, because we were told that nearly 2,000 years ago. And so we shouldn't be surprised when events play out that way. So, anyhow, all I'm really saying is don't get caught up with the fake opposition. Don't get caught up in all of the nonsense. Bill Buckley's day passed, the neocons' day passed, and the fake opposition's day is going to pass too. But the eternal truths, the eternal verities are always there, they always remain the same, and they will always be there. Have a good evening. We'll see you on the blog.